Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Father John Wilson here. It's May 13th, 2020, the feast of Our Lady of Fatima, and the 103rd anniversary of the first apparitions of Our Lady to those three shepherd children in Portugal. Today, I'd like to conclude our series on the servant of God, Mary Teresa Tallon. I hope I'm grateful for everyone who's stuck it out this long, for being along for the ride. I hope that you've found in her life something to encourage you. And I'm gonna keep going with these daily reflections. I'll find a different topic soon, hopefully, and I'll be back with you either tomorrow or the next day. But to want to talk about her final years. So the Parish Visitors of Mary Immaculate were founded in 1920, and soon after their founding, Mother Tallon's activity really moved behind the scenes. She was there. She was still superior until almost to the end of her life, and she died in 1954, March 10th, and but her primary work was not the mission itself of visiting and knocking on doors. It was managing and leading her growing community, forming the novices, planning the community's expansion. They moved into different cities and even different countries. They're in the Philippines and Nigeria even now, and and actually very soon after the community's foundation, the Mother House moved out of New York. They bought a piece of property in Monroe, moved out of New York City. Monroe, New York is in Orange County, about an hour and a half north of the city. It's where the Parish Visitors Mother House still is. It's called Mary Crest. It's definitely worth a visit. Their chapel is beautiful. Mother Tallon herself is interred in the chapel, and that's where she was. Now, in terms of what happened in those last 30 years, I want to pass over them because it's not a part of her life I've looked at in any real depth, and I don't think we should be talking about things we don't know about. But there's a scene from the end of her life that really jumped out at me. Her health had never been good, right? Even since her experience with diphtheria in San Francisco in 1905. And so she was struggling with her health. In her last year, she was in a decline. And if you've had experience with people at the end of their lives whose minds are slowing down, one of the things you notice is that their thoughts kind of go back to the patterns of thought that they've built for themselves over the course of a life. They often will repeat the kind of key words and phrases from moments in their lives and things about their lives that you can tell that they've spent the lifetime thinking about. And that should be a lesson for us, right? That how where our minds are at the end, it might very well be shaped by what we concentrate on now. So we should focus on the highest things, even if we think we've got a long time. But in Mother Mary Teresa's final words, you get a sense of where her mind has been at. It's been on her mission, and especially just on the things of God. And this is something she said about a month before her death, and I just thought it was beautiful. I want to read it to you. She says, "Sometimes when I'm alone, I just work on the sign of the cross. I think there is so much in it, and it is usually so carelessly done. When I make it, I think I am in the bosom of the Holy Trinity, and I ask when I die that I will go to the bosom of the Holy Trinity. It is too great an honor, but I aspire to it because they, the persons of the Trinity, love me and Christ died for me. Isn't that interesting? Like the way even she phrased it, I work on the sign of the cross, just, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Such a simple gesture, and yet something that she would see the need to work on, to actually enter into the full mystery of what that prayer means. That's where her mind was at, even in her final days, and I think that's beautiful. Another interesting thing about actually, what happened after she died, and I want to be very, very careful about the way I talk about this. But it's interesting, she was buried at Mary Crest in Monroe, and the sister cemetery is like, it's not quite a swamp, but there's lots of standing water. It's not a good place for the preservation of someone's remains. And yet, in 2015, when they exhumed her remains as part of starting the cause for her canonization, her body was found to be, I want to be very careful about how I say this, surprisingly well preserved. Surprisingly well preserved for the environment that it was in. And now we know from the history of our church that this is a sign that God sometimes gives of someone's holiness is the preservation from corruption of their mortal remains. Think of someone like Saint Bernadette, the visionary of Lourdes. If you go see her body even today, it looks like the day she died. There is not a one-to-one correspondence here between your holiness in life and whether your body corrupts or not. That's certainly not the case. But it is a sign that God sometimes gives. And, I am reserving all judgment about Mother Tallon's body and what's going on there. But it was certainly at least something for me personally that when I learned this, I said, well, maybe this is something worth paying attention to. And that's that got me reading her writings, and that's where I really encountered her spirit. So I just throw that out there. I think it's interesting, and if you were to go to her community's chapel in Monroe, you could pray at her tomb. It's worthwhile if you're in the area. And I as I think I mentioned at the beginning, the value for me in looking at her life is, I think there's a lot of encouragement that it offers to us today. Saint John Henry Newman had a really interesting line. He's the one of the great theologians of our church. He was a convert to the Catholic faith from Anglicanism in the 19th century, and he once said, and I don't mean this in any kind of polemical way. He once said, "To be deep in history is to cease to be Protestant." And he actually said that before several years before he entered the Catholic Church. But what he meant by that, and he was a great student of history, was that when you actually look at how the Church has operated from the beginning, you see that there's no actual rupture. Like there's not a and this is how he kind of healed himself from the kind of the standard Protestant view of history that, okay, well, the church by the 16th century just became completely corrupt and had lost sight of the gospel. And he looking at the early church and how it operated, he realized, like, this is simply not true. The church is the church. The church has always been the church. The church always will be the church. And so for us, looking at the challenges that our church faces in these days, it is so encouraging to learn history. to look at how the saints have operated, to look at the challenges that they've faced, and how God has brought about the proclamation of the gospel through them, even in the midst of all those situations. So with servant of God Mary Teresa Tallon, there's a great lesson for us in her zeal for the lost. We got a lot of lost people out there, a lot of people, especially fallen away Catholics, right, who need to be invited back into the life of grace. And could it be as simple as, extending a surprising invitation? And it could be, but only if, as she also understood, we ourselves are constantly committed to going deeper into the heart of Jesus Christ in prayer. She wanted her sisters to be contemplative missionaries. And for all of us, even those who are not ourselves in the consecrated religious life, there is a powerful lesson there for how we share the gospel of Jesus Christ as well. God bless you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you soon.